Hi everyone, so good evening. I've actually now finished my work and I can actually now play a bit of Genshin Impact to relax. And we're here on these beautiful islands with Kokomi. The mood and the setting is awesome. But let us discuss meta and whether sort of theory crafting is useful or not. So on the second point, theory crafting is definitely useful. So if you don't know any theory crafting websites, go to Genshin Wiki or Kaching Mains. They pretty much do a great job. But in essence, theory crafting is all about answering specific binary questions, such as given my Noel, what's the best weapon? Given my character, what's the best sort of artifacts that I can put onto a character? Given certain talents, what's the optimal priority, etc., etc. So theory crafting is useful for stuff like elemental gauge theory, like how you should use your dash cancelling, what are like sort of animation cancels that you can use. There's lots of aspects of the fundamental principles of the game that is very useful to know if you're a Genshin Impact player. For instance, a lot of people still make the mistake of pressing Xiangling's Q and then pressing Bennett's Q afterwards, instead of understanding the idea and the role of snapshotting your skills such that you can do maximum damage in a given window. And then, of course, the team rotation that is then born from that. So theory crafting, definitely very strong, very useful. I find that it is very good at answering questions such as, I've got a new hero, what are some of the viable team comps? And you guys can check out like the Kaching main guides. They're very good, although I would like on them to see like more practical videos of not just talking about like a hyper carry Raiden Shogun, but actually sort of demonstrating it so people can see what the intended way is to play things, because I often feel that 95% of the player base is very casual, mobile oriented, and they just put together their favorite characters, and they often struggle with content where they don't need to struggle, even if though they might be like well geared and so on. Now, a second question that I want to sort of answer is meta, and I think this is where I disagree with a lot of theory crafters, in that there is no real meta in Genshin Impact. So a lot of players would define a meta as being a free-to-play player min-maxing with the goal of building a team comp that is decently invested, such that they can consistently clear the spiral abyss with 36 stars every time it resets. That to me is a very overly restrictive definition, and it doesn't really work out because there's lots of loopholes around that. The first and most obvious thing being that even two min-maxing free-to-play players can have a variety of or they can have like a huge variance in terms of how their accounts look, in terms of the wishes they've got, the constellations and the characters they've pulled, and also the amount their like skill deltas. For instance, the one guy can manage his resources and builds beautifully, but when it comes to execution and gameplay, he is just terrible. And another person can take under-leveled equipment, have godlike gameplay mechanics, iframing, etc., and then essentially bypass sort of the DPS checks through sheer mechanics and understanding when to use which abilities. So in that sense, given like the wide disparity of stuff, you can't really consistently define a meta. A lot of people would say Ganyu is better than Ayaka, but then you get to the like speed running realm where Ayaka at C6 or 5 just is always like way more useful than Ganyu. And that is just a sort of fact. So these things always become contentious, and it's always difficult to give people advice except on like a case by case basis. So why do we struggle to like why is it like difficult to define a meta? And that is primarily because of the fact that we've got just too many variables running. So in a game like Overwatch or Valorant, which is like a PvP, like player versus player, if I pick a certain character and the enemy picks that exact same character, apart from cosmetic differences, the characters are functionally the same. So whatever abilities they've got, I've got. So then it all becomes about how do I use my abilities, how do I use it with my team, and how do we use it, and how does my team play on a given map. And then if we look at the highest level of play, we can then infer what combinations of heroes and sort of what sequences the team uses their abilities would be most optimal or meta in trying to consistently win, or at least not put yourself at a disadvantage against the enemy. That is very clear cut for defining a meta. In Genshin Impact, there's just too much variety to define a meta. So if someone defines meta as clearing the spiral abyss with 36 stars, then the question becomes, do I need a team? For instance, in my specific case, I can do the Spiral Abyss 36 stars with my Ayaka solo while taking no damage. I can do content outside of that taking no damage, Asda, the Phantom Flow event in Okuden mode, solo no damage. So from my perspective, if we define meta as regards to clearing only the Spiral Abyss, then my Ayaka has then solidly and consistently proven that I don't need shields, I don't need healing, I definitely don't need a Bennett buff, I don't need any of these other characters because of how just incredibly insanely broken this character is when played to the highest skill ceiling. But that argument only applies to my C6 R5 Ayaka with my mechanics, and it's unlikely to apply to a majority of the player base. And I also have this like perception that people think free to play is some sort of godly standard. It's not, it's just your flavor in terms of how you want to curate your experience in the game and how much you're willing to support the expensive server infrastructure that keeps it going for all of us. So in my opinion, I hate meta because A, it forces people that have played for hundreds of hours in their game to essentially be dictated to what they should pull for and what they should skip on, and that gives the false impressions as to the full utility of the heroes that you can get. So if I'm told that you will skip Kokomi, you will skip Tartaglia, and you will pull for the Hu Tao rerun because this character is broken, and if you don't pull for her or for Ganyu, then you are losing out on your account, you're ruining your account, then honestly, I mean, I would not listen to anyone that's like that. I mean, no character in this game is a must pull, and I think the free-to-play players using Lisa, Amber, Kayaka, Kaya, where's my sort of English, like using those free to like starters and the Traveler to sort of clear the Spiral Abyss with 9 stars, I think they sort of like bear out the estimate that you don't need Xiangling or Bennett or all these other characters. You just need to understand the game well enough and then apply the fundamental principles to your account to play to your satisfaction, because let's be honest, there is no leaderboard. You can clear the Spiral Abyss by setting up a certain team for floor 1, going out, putting in a new team, getting a 2-star clear, but then now a 3-star clear on floor 2, etc, etc. There's so many variations you can play, such that I think it's very difficult to consistently define something. And if we do define a meta for the hardcore free-to-play min maxes, then that is like a 5%, like for 5% of the player base, then that only then applies to 5% of the player base, because it really doesn't matter for the rest of us. And I think to sort of make that point like really come home, I've written like an incredible analysis on Kokomi, and I'm sure people have written guides and stuff, but if you go onto Hoyo Lab and you post a cute picture of Kokomi playing with a fish, you'll get 10,000 likes, compared to like what, 47 comments, 113 likes. That's nothing. So with all that theoretical talk and stuff about a character, honestly, if you even look at the video and the video sizes, people don't care. They just want to know, is this character Unga Bunga? Does it have a booba sword and like hit all the enemies? And that's what people care about. And there's also this feeling of attachment to characters, such that I've played with characters for a long time. So for me to now suddenly chop and change and invest according to what the internet finds popular is also like a bit of a slap in the face. Right, so the last thing that I want to sort of touch on is Kokomi, because I've actually touched on her quite a lot, but I've listened to a Kaching Mains like podcast where the guy sort of said, well, you know, her off-field hydro application abilities is only useful for freeze comp, and then only marginally so, and other sort of people are better, and it's not useful for vaporize, and Kokomi falls flat, etc, etc. And that is generally really false, because at the highest skill ceiling, when you understand that you can't just look at characters, and this is where I think theorycrafting gets it wrong, is that they look at characters for having 1 or 2 niche abilities that they can somehow blend to give like a good outcome. Whereas I feel that you need to look at the entire vector of utilities that a character can offer, and then like look at all the elements in that vector and sort of extract all of that into getting like a good play style. So that is typically my philosophy, for instance, in building Ayaka. I've built it in such a way that all the aspects of a kit shine really well without one aspect, for instance, the ultimate, shining too much. It's the same with Kokomi. She provides way more than just Hydro application. For instance, with the Raiden Shogun, you can have uninterrupted DPS without even losing stamina or wasting stamina to dodge, because this jellyfish just enables you to go ham. And a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, but then there's a range and the enemies move out. But honestly, those are skill-based problems, that and positioning problems, and also judgment problems. That is not a fundamental problem with the kit of the character. People underestimate the fact that you've got a character that can just tank damage and also just do team-wide healing, team-wide damage, consistent damage. My Kokomi does 300 to 330k depending on certain things in an ultimate burst. That's way more than most free-to-play players can even do with like their Ganyu or like their Ayaka, etc, etc. So the fact of the matter is there's so many variables that ultimately when you get like a really non-niche character like Kokomi and like a very strong generalist, she is going to be like shafted by theory crafters because they want a niche such that they can sort of slot Kokomi into a role instead of understanding that the character is more generally useful. So that is what I mean by the practicalities are sometimes missing. And I don't mean from theory crafting like there's not a video that can demonstrate a certain application or theory or whatever. I mean like the general game sense as to using the characters at a very high level is missing from Kaching mains, from 1010 and all these YouTubers. When I look at their gameplay, it's shocking by my standards, of course. For an average player, they might find it to be relatively fine, but the way in which you can absolutely squeeze out all the sorts of elements in a character is what's lacking. And I think as we move to a world of desynchronized rotations, hopefully that will come to the front and people can realize exactly that through proper mechanics, Kokomi can offer you way more than most of the other characters can. And that's just what I sort of wanted to say. So in summary, basically theory crafting is useful. It's impossible to properly define a meta. Ayaka is the best character in the game in my opinion, and Kokomi is just beautiful and awesome. Cheers.